Yeah, so let's follow up on a bunch of the different things we were. Let's start with income inequality.
Okay.
You're going to say, yes, please.
So income inequality, this is something I think we've all thought about. You know, I was working on that topic when I was still at Goldman Sachs. And
in which direction?
Were you working on increasing it?
Yeah, make it wider.
But I think...
I would say
I think Cheryl was approaching.
I think Tim just made up for his prior pessimism with humor. We appreciate that.
But in all seriousness, I looked at that as something that was
I was serious.
what was a huge issue, and so we talked with economists. You know, matter of fact, with the current chairman of the Economic Advisors, Kruger, when he was at Princeton, and my first speech as Treasury Secretary was on that topic. Now, But I look at it, I'm going to come back to what Bob said. Of course, there's big debate in terms of what the driver is. And globalization is a force, but I think that what's going on right now with technology and the digital revolution is huge. I think it is the biggest economic trend in the world today, by far. And I think technology brings with it huge advantages for society overall, but the pace of change is so fast and so violent. And as I look at industry after industry, whether it's engineering, architecture, law, business, you see the middle being carved out. Anything that can be routinized is being routinized. So it's sort of a winner take all. And so, you've got to ask yourself and say, I have a belief that this is progress. You can't turn back the clock. Most of the new technologies I see are really much more about productivity, and I don't see them creating more new jobs than they're eliminating, but I'm sure there will be some. And so I think the key question is not, gee, is this happening? I think the key question is, what do you do about it? And I'm not going to practice without a license and talk about training and education and so on, but I do believe the kinds of economic reforms I was talking about earlier will make a difference and help deal with the problem. But basically, and this is not just a U.S. problem. It's hard to think of a country that doesn't have it. So it's a global problem, and I don't think our democracies are going to work the way we need them to work if we don't deal with it. And it's just too easy for politicians to be populist and to look for scapegoats as opposed to dealing with a real problem.
So the two issues come together, right? The dysfunction that Bob talked about in ability to create policy that Tim mentioned. It's not possible to look at the situation and say, we are very well placed to handle serious economic challenges. Technological changes. What is possible to do? Or let me ask the question two ways. One, if you could pass the right policies, what would they be? And then two, what can we do? This is an amazing group of people of a lot of influence in a lot of industries. What can people do to create the political environment which would get us to the right policies? Tim, what are the right policies, and then how would we get there?
Well, it's not, these aren't challenges we're going to solve in
the next 46 minutes?
No, I mean, there's no simple, compelling, clean, easy set of things to these things. These are challenges for a generation or more, and they're going to take a long war. It'll be like the forever war in economic policy in this. But, I think you need to have a period where you have stronger economic growth relative to potential. It's hard to do much on these things without growth. It's very, very important to recognize at the beginning that fundamentally these outcomes for the low-income worker or even the median worker are hugely dependent on how fast we're able to grow. And part of this depends on our ability just to do a better job as a country at delivering the type of public goods only governments can deliver. And education is going to be fundamental to that. And of course, we know that that's a complicated, hard thing to do. So I would say, at the start, you have to recognize that designing policy to try to create more rapid growth, infrastructure is a good example of things that have good high returns in terms of growth and good high returns in terms of they're more employment intensive, and just trying to focus on some basic things that improve our capacity to equip people with the skills they need to compete in this world. That's a very hard thing to do, but again, we're not close to the frontier of what's possible. in those areas. And I would focus on those things.